Oh, all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed. This is Gearface. I got another one. D is back again. I've tricked him one more time. He's here to teach me all about surely one of the biggest men in Potemkin. Has to be top 5 biggest big men in Exceed. Super excited for the Potemkin lesson. D, it seems, based on this incredible drawing he's done, is also very excited about Potemkin. D, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Um, I understand that you are a fan of this character.
Little bit. I'm slightly biased in favor of several grapplers throughout Exceed. Potemkin is one of my favorites, not just in Ghost Shred board game, but in all of Exceed.
In
He's
all of
yeah,
Exceed.
I'm a fan.
That's great. So disclaimer, as always, before we get started, number one, we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. Not the only way you can play Exceed, especially with Potemkin. I have seen him do some very silly things, and I'm not entirely convinced that they were 100% optimal, but man, they were fun. If the lines of play that we're describing with Potemkin aren't what you want to do with the character, don't do that. Do what you do want to do. He seems fun. I would recommend that you play him for fun. Number two, when we talk about strategy on the show, it's often in pretty prescriptive terms. There's always an asterisk next to it whenever we say things like always do this or never do that. Exceed's not a solved game. We do not claim, I don't claim to know anything, frankly. D claims to know some things.
Do
But
I?
even,
I
ah,
don't know.
eh, you have a better reason to call yourself an expert than I do, surely.
I'll claim
Um,
to know some things. I just won't claim to pronounce them correctly or remember them on time.
True, fair point. Yeah. So, if we do get something wrong about Potemkin, or if you have a line of play that is very, very different and has had success for you, please let us know. We don't know everything about this character, and we would love to learn more. But
Mhm.
yeah, with all that said, D, tell me about the big man.
Potemkin. All right, so he is kind of the iconic grappler of Strive, and grappler can mean different things to different people, but basically, it means, or I'll put it this way: when I say you're a grappler, what I want to convey is this: you are going to lose most exchanges. You are going to struggle to be where you want to be standing with your opponent where you want them to be standing. You are going to feel bad about that. And then you're going to hit them like a truck and you'll win 2 or 3 or more exchanges at once because you hit them. Uh, that's grappler life. Grapplers tend to struggle in neutral, which is where both players are kind of jockeying for an advantage, trying to move around, trying to use boost and other things to position themselves to get on top of things, and then also resources play into neutral. So grapplers tend to have poor neutral. They tend to have incredibly terrifying mix-ups, which is where you can threaten options that the opponent can't beat all of. Where you go, I'm playing A, B, or C, and you can pick one of them to beat or two of them to beat, depending on what you're actually doing. And they have to commit. And if they get the wrong thing, then you hit them for like 6, 7, 8, some reasonable amount of damage.
Right.
Um,
As much as another character would hit you for in 2 strikes,
yep.
maybe
Um,
maybe 3 strikes.
Yes, or more because all of these numbers are lies, but we'll come back to
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Um, so, he's a grappler. He is a range 1 character. He likes range 1. His stuff hits at range 1. You may in fact notice, although, well, with the exception of the ultras, range 1 is printed on all of these cards.
Mhm.
Um, and none of them have movement effects that would cause them to not be able to hit at range 1. He also has an ability which says range 1 on it, in a pretty important way. When you initiate a strike at range 1, you have +1 power and +1 armor. That, by the way, is half the reason that all his numbers are lies.
Okay.
Um, little more power than it looks like is going around on all these cards, and also on his normals, which is another useful feature.
Yep.
Um, but yes, so range 1 is where you want to be. It's where you're scary. It's where everything works, and also everything is stronger than usual. Longer ranges are going to be not so exciting. They might make you slightly disappointed. They might make you really sad, depending on the opponent you're facing. But yeah, so that's the grappler dynamic. Is you should expect that most of the time you're not going to be at range 1 because your opponent knows that if you're at range 1, they lose.
Right.
Um,
They are not complying with you. They are going to try to beat you by not letting you have what you want.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk first about the reason or the reasons that range 1 is amazing and you win the game. And then the ways that you get to range 1, and then the other stuff,
Okay.
um,
Sounds good.
as I go through the kit breakdown. So let's yeah,
We don't need any of those.
not yet. Here are the reasons, or at least the biggest reasons that range one is so good for you.
Right.
Um, so your ability is +1 power, +1 armor if you initiate at range one, or if you're in exceed mode, which is something that is not guaranteed to happen, but it's not unlikely. It's I'll talk more about why later, but you should expect to exceed probably about half the games you play, if not a little more than half the games you play.
Okay.
Um, when you are initiating at range one, you get +2 power and +2 armor. The difference between +1 and +2 is pretty big in exceed.
Sure.
Um, this turns, in fact, these two cards into horrifying monstrous cards, where this is 6 printed power, and over here that means that it stuns sweep, and over here it stuns focus.
Right.
And if we look at the other properties of this card, by the way, the thing that it loses to is dive, because dive is speed 4 and will jump over it.
Right.
It can't be pushed or pulled and has 3 guard and some amount of armor, so it
So
beats grasp.
can't be depositioned with grasp.
Yep. If the opponent doesn't have room to retreat because they're cornered, then cross doesn't stun it, and it's range 1 and 2, so they won't probably be able to get out range.
Okay.
Uh, it has 3 guard and 1 or 2 armor, so assaults doesn't stun it, and it outdamages assaults.
Yep.
Uh, dive, I mentioned the thing that actually does escape it, and then obviously we don't care about dust at range 1. If at range 2, if you're initiating, the stuns dust. At range uh, 3, you're not playing this, so I don't care.
Right.
And then again at range 1 with plus power, this stuns sweep, and if you have +2 power, it stuns focus. And if they played block, well, they've got to block a bunch of damage, and also they're discarding a random card, and that's pretty bad for them.
That's pretty bad. So most of the time when we talk, so basically this loses to in exceed mode at your preferred range when you're initiating. This loses to exactly dive, right?
Yep.
And by loses, I mean it whiffs and they whiff on you as well.
Right.
Most of
They yeah.
most of the time when we are talking about a card that loses to exactly one thing, we're talking about an ultra.
Mhm.
Like that,
Yeah.
this is and frequently the reason that dive beats that thing is because I just put 3 gauge on it and whiffed, and now I'm sad. This is one card that
Mhm.
is, you know, dealing all this damage. It's a special, it's not a resource intensive card. It's just a thing I can do, uh, not for free, as you said, because Potemkin has to struggle so much to get in to play this in the first place. But
Mhm.
this is brutal to
Yeah.
hit with, basically.
You don't have to commit any extra resources. You just go, "I'm already in my favorite position. Cool. That was the hard parts. Now I
Right.
have access to this, and it's my opponent's problem to figure out what they're gonna do now that I have access to this."
Okay.
Um, and then, if you so EXing it does mean that it becomes a Egyptian god card. It doesn't really lose to anything anymore because it outspeeds dive, and then it has an easier time stunning sweep and focus. But EXing means you're using both copies. It's usually not worth it. Um, you better be very confident that you must beat the dive if you're going to EX this card, because you'd much rather play 2 of them, because 2 of them means you win 2 strikes instead of just 1.
Right. Right.
Generally speaking. But yes, this card is fantastic. It's super scary. It's very reliable, especially if you can get into what is your favorite position, which is roughly here,
Okay.
where cross doesn't work and literally only dive is their option. Um, speaking of dive, you may recall that that dive is speed 4. So initiating with this means that dive is the worst possible thing, the worst possible thing they can do.
Yep.
Because if you initiate with this and they play dive, you have advantage, and you're still in your favorite position at range 1, and they discard 2 cards,
You
so they
just
have
play
no resources,
so
and
you
now you
just
play Potemkin Buster.
now you just play that instead. Okay.
Yes, yes, Garuda Impact into Potemkin Buster is canonical here.
Yep.
Um, they should not have tried to jump out. They were too slow. They get caught, and now they're dead because they are
Right.
eating, somewhere between I can do math, 13 and 15 damage, depending on if you're in Exceed mode, and that's 2
In
strikes.
in 2 strikes, right.
Yeah, that's basically half of somebody's life total.
Yeah.
Um, that's silly. Like that's unreasonable.
Yeah, and
Uh,
to the thing about, that's when I said earlier on, that's something, you know, a grappler mix-up is something that when you win a grappler mix-up, that's something that another character would do in 2 strikes. That isn't. That's like 3, right? Like
yes.
15 damage is not 2 strikes for any other character. I'm looking at sweep twice, that's 12. That's less than 15. So that's again,
Yeah.
that's brutal.
Yes. And if Garuda Impact wins a strike, it generally wins it cleanly. Like it might trade. So in front side, it trades against sweep, but you still have advantage. They still discard 2 cards. You only lose 1 at random, and you take less damage because you have
You
an
have
armor.
you have armor, sure.
In Exceed mode, they have to play focus because you will now stun the sweep. And so they get to draw a card, but they still have to discard 2 cards first. You still have advantage. Again, it's still really, really good for you.
Right.
So Garuda Impact against anything slower than itself is fantastic. It tends to be a win for you, even if it's not a particularly clean win. But my point in saying that is, like, usually if sweep wins a strike, it wins it by trading up by about 3 life.
Three-ish, right.
Right. Whereas this goes up against a focus, and if you're in Exceed mode, then you're hitting for 5 and you're taking 2.
Right.
Like their focus isn't able to trade up against you because of how insane your stats become. Um, yeah. So Grid Impact is, and I know it is a mid speed. Even in Exceed mode, it only has 2 armor, which means that at range 1, they can play a grasp and they will actually stun it.
Right.
And that's a little sad. That's inconvenient. The reason that they'll hesitate to play the grasp is because they should know you have this.
Yes.
And so holding this mix up of your opponent is what kind of makes the grappler thing. It makes the grappler ideology real, where you say you have to decide which of these you beat, and if you pick the wrong one, then you're mostly dead.
Right.
Um, Now, if they try to cover, if they try to cover Buster and they get hit by Garuda, then they probably lose to Buster the next turn, which means that people will often do the other thing and say, "I'm going to cover Garuda," and because of that, lose to Buster.
Right.
Um, Use that against them. Like, watch your opponents, watch their tendencies, and keep your threats live. The reason that this works is because both of them are live. If 2 copies of either of these is down, you should be looking at when you're going to reshuffle,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
that's a big
So
deal.
yeah, and it's not a situation where these cards have redundancy over each other or with anything else in the kit where like, okay, my big scary mid speed and my big scary mid speed, this one's down, I'll just hit them with Garuda Impact. No, they work because they aren't covered by the same thing.
Right. And your closest analogs are the I got to have advantage, but
Right.
it doesn't do all that much damage. Even in Exceed mode, it's not going to stun a sweep. But this is a thing that says, okay, I'm still at my favorite position with advantage, and this is your 6 power or 8 power, sorry, 7 or 8 power range 1 low speed that they can dive over.
Right.
Like, you have a tiny bit of redundancy.
Okay.
That said, like, using these is fine. These boosts tend to be awesome for you, um, because this will do extremely stupid things to your stats. Um, Badass at range 1 with your ability means you have +2 power, +2 armor, +1 speed, +1 guard, or +3
+3,
power,
+3. Yeah.
+3 armor,
Yeah.
+1 speed, +1 guard. It means you can do things like EX Potemkin Buster and not spin 2 copies of Potemkin Buster, and just kind of look at your opponent and be like, all right, I guess you're dead.
Yeah, pretty
Like,
much.
you can't do
That
anything.
dive doesn't work anymore specifically because that I hope you have EX dive now, basically, to
Mhm.
deal with this 4-speed Potemkin Buster.
Yep. It also
So
allows this specific combination is at range 1, you go, okay, well, now I have, on front side, I have 2 armor, 1 guard, so you can't grasp me. I'm going to close in, so unless you have a lot of room to retreat, you can't cross away. I'm faster than most anything else. And if you play a sweep or a focus, okay, well, I have +2 power and +2 armor. Like, I'm going to
I'll
trade reasonably well even then and still have advantage and still be at range 1.
still have advantage, and you just lost one of your best defensive cards. Cool.
Yep.
That seems good for you. So, and just a couple clarifications. Potemkin's ability works on initiation. It's not a hit effect. So, if I do grasp somebody, for example, if I grasp Ryu here, and by the time my damage goes off, they're no longer at range 1. That's okay. I still get my bonuses from that. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm
So,
also
like, if he plays grasp and you play sweep and he pushes you, it's fine. You have
it
the 1 armor and you have the plus power.
you still get everything. Okay.
Yeah. Or
Specifically
if
on
you
an
play grasp and you push them away,
Yep.
then the same thing applies. You still have plus power. You still have plus armor.
You get
As
everything.
long as you initiated, and as long as when you initiated, you were at range 1.
Okay, makes sense.
Like,
And
that lasts
then
for the whole strike.
I can't help but notice, and we might get into this in a second. I can't help but notice that both Potemkin Buster and Garuda Impact have range 1 to 2.
Hmm.
So there's another case where I would be playing these cards that they don't do nearly as much as what you're describing, right? Like Garuda
Hmm.
Impact merely hits for 5 and makes my opponent discard 2, and uh, I gain advantage off of it. Like that's still
Hmm.
pretty crazy, but it's not the the full combo that you're describing.
Yeah, it's not the world shattering thing.
Right. How often am I doing that? Like am I really trying to just make that last space of movement before I play either of these cards?
It so you will mostly want to be playing them at range 1. That is like they exist at range 2 for a few reasons. One of them is your wild swings are not garbage at range 2.
Yep.
Because very often like, especially if you lose a strike to a grasp, you can end up in a situation where your opponent got you to range 2 or 3, and then due to your boost kit, which we'll definitely talk about it at length, you will be moving from 3 to 2.
Okay.
And at that point, it's important that you have things that function even if they're not ideal.
Right. So
Um,
you could wild swing into that and not be incredibly sad because if I remember correctly from like your Tager lesson that you taught me a little bit about, um frequently grapplers don't care about strikes if they're not like if they're not going to commit anything from hand to a strike. Okay, if I'm at range 2 and I happen to get Potemkin Buster, that's not the worst thing that could ever happen.
right. Like
Okay.
you're not generally going to be initiating at range 2 with Potemkin Buster, but it's not the worst wild spin you could have. You're not generally going to be uh well, you're not really ever likely to be responding at range 2 with Cruda Impact unless you have the soul read, as it were, on their dust,
Right.
right? But if they play a dust and you wild swing it, or if they play a sweep and you wild swing it, it functions.
Right.
Um, it means that you're not crippled. It also has a very important interaction with again, part of his boost kit. Um, yeah, I should start talking about the boosts, but um, so several things about his card shapes are uh like there's some niche usage to this, and then you look at his boost kit and it turns into, oh, now with a boost it becomes really good.
Okay.
So the easiest example of that is this boost, um,
Oh, yep.
which
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah. So now you go, oh, at range 3, Garuda Impacts only loses to Assault, which will bring or Slash, which will bring them to range 1,
Which you're
because
fine
anything
with.
else, I push them out of range, or if I stun them, then I pull them in. I have advantage, so I can do whatever I want next turn. They're just getting a bunch of cards. Like huge Garuda Impacts only to Slash, essentially.
Right.
Um, and at Potemkin Buster, this actually is kind of funny because if you're initiating at range, you don't have the benefit of his extra defenses, but it means you're able to threaten a range 3 Potemkin Buster, which can beat a sweep and uh, do a bunch of damage. Like it's usually not what you would prefer to do,
But
but
it's still a
yeah.
threat that the opponent has to deal with, and if they do play the sweep, okay, you're kind of sad because you might actually have to push them out to dodge it. But if they don't play the sweep, awesome, you pull them into range 1, and now they have to deal with that.
Hmm. Yeah. For another example, slide head means that's okay. We're gonna have to go right into talking about boost set length actually. So he
Okay.
has a thing that happens across his boosts, which here we go. Season 6 players will kind of recognize this from Respect or from Waldstein's Face Me, where it's a uh, dynamic that manipulates what the opponent feels comfortable doing. There's also, let's see, Faultless Defense has that same interaction. Where is it? There it is. This is obviously a normal boost,
Mhm.
but to talk about this interaction, um, you boost one of these and you close one. And if the opponent does not strike you, there is something good happening for you. Um, this one, like Faultless Defense, says if your opponent didn't strike, you get free gauge. That's amazingly good, and we'll talk more about why that is in a bit.
Okay.
Um, but if they don't strike, you get free gauge. If they do strike, well, presumably you were prepared for that, or you wouldn't have moved to the range that you're at. Like you
Right.
moved to a range where you're comfortable with them striking into you. You would probably went to range 3, where you can, yeah, where you have something that will respond. You'll probably play something like Slash, which only loses to their Slash, which Again, if they do that, they're at range 1, fine and good. Or you went to range 1 or 2. 2, you'll probably be wild swinging. 1, depending on your hands, you'll be playing like a focus, or you'll be wild swinging, and you'll be fine with that because your range 1 is really good.
Right.
Um, but yes, like this says the opponent needs to strike into you. Um, and it's a kind of a resource neutral way to move in that sense, where you're going, okay, I'm taking the walk action to move forward, but I'm also forcing my opponent to strike, which means they're not going to draw a card at the end of this turn. And so I get this tiny, tiny bit of resource pressure on them where I'm able to move just a little bit more efficiently.
At
Um,
some point after having played this boost and made them strike, or played this combination of boosts, at some point your opponent is going to have to prepare or stop committing to strikes and wild swinging instead, or something. And
yeah,
th-
for the most
th-
part, if you force them on the offensive and you don't perform any worse that way, then when you're on, when they can make the decision to be on the offense themselves, it's going to hurt their tempo. It's going to mean that they have to slow down, take a breath at some point.
got it. Okay, and then you can exploit that hole by moving in more aggressively, or throwing an attack that you've been saving. You are getting options out of their hands so that they don't have anything to respond to you with when you finally are making your play. Is that correct?
That's yeah, that's valid, and that's mainly the case with these, which are the like they're designed to force plays in that regard. This one especially, right? Because
Yeah.
if my opponent strikes, this gives me no material advantage. I just
Right.
moved. I just moved.
It
Uh,
and kind
oh,
of
sorry. This
it
one.
and kind of inversely, uh, if they don't strike into you, sometimes it's like, oh man, they didn't strike into me. Maybe not for Potemkin, but sometimes, oh, they didn't strike into my faultless defense. I really wanted that 4 guard to make something safer. All I have now is this
Mhm.
gauge. You didn't lose anything either by your opponent not striking into you. You just got gauge and
Yep.
positioning, which you want.
Yes. So it is the one which has that dynamic most prominently as I care about this because it's a movement tool that forces my opponent to strike into me, which like generally speaking, people are happy to be the ones initiating because they choose to do it on their own terms. If you are choosing the terms under which your opponent initiates into you, that's pretty good for you.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah, but these others work more like faultless defense in that they don't go away, but they each say now close one. They are like this a little movement step where you're going to take a step forward, and if the opponent strikes, you have a stat bonus, and if they don't, you are threatening to initiate with a different stat bonus. And they're the converse. So the one that you get if they initiate is the defensive one. If they initiate, you get +4 guard or +3 armor, right?
Right.
But if they don't initiate, you get to initiate with +1 speed or +2 power. Uh, this is scary stuff. This is the sort of thing where if they leave this around and you have any amount of gauge, then you can use cancels to turn on a +3 power or maybe a +4 power or some other shenanigans. And therefore, if you have any amount of gauge, people are not going to leave this lying around.
Okay.
Even if you don't have gauge, honestly, they're probably not going to leave it lying around because they see a +2 power on board and they go, well, I don't really want you initiating with +2 power.
Right. And so now they
Uh,
do have the same interaction as these, which is that they force a strike because they don't want to give you the offensive bonus.
yes.
Okay.
But they force a strike where the cost is not just you lost the potential gauge you would have gotten. The cost to them, that
Right.
is well, I said that badly. Well, anyway, my point is you actually have something. You
Right.
have
Right.
+4
Right.
guard or +3 armor. You don't just have a boost in play that is going away.
Sure.
And especially the +3 armor is notable as changing the value exchange of that strike potentially very significantly. Um, because if you were trading anyway, they're trading 3 better. If you were losing anyway,
It's three. It's less bad by three.
yep, it
Okay.
is it is as we were talking about the math of strikes overall across most characters, it is roughly I chose not to lose 1 strike. I chose
Yeah.
not to lose the grasp or the cross or whatever. Um, because I just take 3 less damage. I
Right.
just have effectively more life in the game. Um, but yeah, so that's a dynamic that happens with these where your neutral is very often going to be I take a step and I wait. And if you let me, I'm going to destroy you next turn. So
Okay.
you have to do something, but you have very good reason to be afraid of what I can do.
Got
Um,
it.
because
Okay.
your assault doesn't gain advantage against Garuda Impact because I steal it. Because you hit first, then I have 4 guard, and now I hit you back.
Right. And you're at range one now.
Yes, like that's the worst case, right? So they will generally not throw an assault into +4 guard, but what do they throw? Well, something that you can beat with something is usually the answer.
Sure, yeah.
Uh,
If they're playing, if they're Exceed isn't ever like a completely closed book in terms of mix-ups, but if they're playing to beat a specific thing, you have a little bit of information to go off of.
mhm,
Okay.
right. So at range 3, people will like to play things like dive and dust, even though dive will leave them at range 1.
Mm,
It will ensure that they don't trade down against stuff.
right.
And they also have a decent reason to expect you to want to reserve your slash for its boost. So this has the advanced 3 boost on it, which is cancelable, which
Right.
like any grappler in the world, you would love to just have this all the time forever,
Sure.
which means that you tend to kind of think, Man, maybe I shouldn't play slash." Um, it's fine. You have another one. This does not gain advantage, but it is a speed 5 on curve range 3 option. That also has a significant reward on hits, making it a very good defensive range 3 option.
Because they're less likely to play their slashes or assaults into you anyway. Um, because it'll leave them at range 1. And as you said, they're pretty likely to throw dust or throw dive. Cool.
Right.
Now
Like
you have
the
a committed answer.
right. The general psychology of, well, if Potemkin defends with slash, it means he doesn't get to initiate with a slash. So I'm fine with losing to his defensive slash.
Right.
Um, well, he has something that isn't slash that does that same job, which makes their life harder.
Right. And the best case for initiating with slash is that you are doing it on your turn so that you can actually get the benefit of advantage. This is the draw 2 effect is agnostic. It doesn't matter whose turn it is. That's always great for you.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yes. Like you get to retain your slash for when it's better by using the Mega Fist as that defensive on curve range 3 tool. Uh, so folks, so the general pattern is as folks spy your weaknesses, they'll find out that you have a specific way to prevent that from being a consistent weakness, right? So at range 3, they go, okay, you have to reserve this. Actually, you have this.
Right.
Um, these boosts do silly things where if you get to initiate with speed, then a bunch of your weaknesses and a bunch of your blind spots go away. If you get to have some armor, then you can just take losses and not care for a considerable amount of time.
Right.
If they think that you have a range blind spot, maybe you just don't. Um, and you go, oh, actually, I have a range 4 dust, or range 4 sweep, range 4 slash. Like I can just hit you. It's
Yeah.
not really a problem. Um, so yes, his neutral generally looks like I'm going to play a boost a step forward, and then they have to do something about it. And if they don't, cool. Now you get to initiate with the boost and potentially your ability if you manage to actually get all the way to range 1. But even if not, being at range 3 and throwing a plus speed slash or dive or dust, or a plus power slash or dive or dust are all pretty scary options. Or you can just play the Mega Fist then, for all I care.
Yeah.
Like,
Then
you
it
can play a bunch of reasonable things.
merely a uh 5 damage speed 5, like an on curve at 3, 5 damage draw 2, uh instead of, what it could be closer up. Like that's still pretty scary.
That's still pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so let's see. I said I was going to start with the reason range 1 is absolutely horrifying, which are these two cards and all their implications.
Right.
And then kind of you got the stand-ins here. Although the big caveat on the stand-ins is that the boosts are amazing.
Right.
I will talk.
They're
Yeah,
too good for you to comfortably give up.
yeah, and I should talk about these boosts by the same token, which is that FTB is a very niche boost.
Right.
It is a boost that says, I have lost neutral so hard that I'm going to lose the game to some sort of projectile next turn. Or maybe not the game, but I'm going to lose like 6 or more life or something. I have to say that I'm not going to lose to a projectile next turn. And if you're in that position, okay, you're allowed to use it. Um, you also have to kind of be out of gauge. It's, yeah.
You have some way. I mean, even this, right? Like you take 3 less damage from that projectile and you close in 1. That
That
seems
would probably be better than FTB.
that seems acceptable. Yeah. I mean, the difference, I
Right.
guess, is that it's cancelable, but then you don't add it to gauge afterward anyway.
Yeah, you usually want cancel FTB. It's a very niche thing.
Okay.
Um, I've used it to recover from incredibly bad positioning. If I recall correctly, I used it like against a Sagat who had a low tiger shot that he was looping, and I was at range 7.
I was gonna ask
Um,
about like projectiles that push as well, being extra scary for you because you need to close in so badly.
it's annoying. That said, this is not your silver bolts. This is your last desperate plea for help.
Okay,
Um, FTB is not a boost you generally want to play. It is a boost that you will use if you have to in the worst situations that you could be in.
right. I get it.
Because as long as you have 2 gauge, you almost certainly have a better option, um, which I'll talk about later.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, you generally won't use FTB. This is great for you because you generally don't have to worry about having to not use Potemkin Buster.
Right.
Uh, just play Potemkin Buster. It's good. Carrot Cancel is a bit harder because Carrot Cancel is a boost that you like playing. If the opponent is able to outfootsies you consistently, where they're always moving out of range 1, like Ryu, for example, who
Yeah.
just says, actually, every turn I can just step away. The fact that you have a cancelable close 1, draw 1 is important. It says, like, okay, actually, we're at range 1 for real. I'm serious and I'm striking.
Right.
Cost gauge to do it and cost a copy of Brute Impact. So it's a little dicey.
So
That said,
if you can
the
get to
value's
range
high.
one, if you can get to range one without it with things like this or like this that you would like to be playing in neutral anyway, do that first.
Right. This is one of those cases where you need to strike this turn. You know that you'll not be able to maintain your position if they get the chance to take their
Right.
next turn. Yeah, now is the time. So
You're you're
use carrot cancel. Mhm.
you're
Good.
fighting like Merkava or somebody.
Oh gosh. Well, with Merkava, he usually makes more space, and you have different tools for that. That's where you
Oh,
dash, and that's
okay.
where you use
I get
your other
you.
button.
I get you.
It's the people
But
who make a little space consistently, who say that we'll always be at range 2 or 3, but never at range 1.
that makes sense.
That
Okay.
carrot cancel shines. Mhm.
But
Because at range,
in both
yeah,
of these cases, though, the thing that I'm weighing it against is mostly that these cards are so valuable to both hit with, but also to keep alive as threats for the other one to hit with.
yes,
Got it.
yes, yeah. Having your second Garuda impact drop means that you're no longer threatening Garuda impact, and
And
that's pretty
and
important.
it kind of means by extension that I'm no longer threatening Potemkin Buster.
Yeah, with both Garuda impacts down,
Yeah.
right? Then their dive loses to your faster buttons and slash, but they're likelier to be willing to play it because Potemkin Buster is now more vulnerable. Like
Right.
your mix up weakens. One corner of it is gone.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, like heaven help you if all of these are down because then your range 1 advantage tools are down,
Right.
and
And
that makes me
now
sad.
your big scary win condition button has a very exploitable hole in it that you really don't have anything else that can patch it.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, don't let your mix ups drop.
Yep.
Keep them alive.
Makes sense.
Mhm. Okay, so yes, why range 1 is scary. The ways to get to range 1, well, your boost game is a huge part of this. That's why, we stopped and talked about the boost for a while, is that you've got da-di-da-da-da. This one does not have the properties that the other ones have. It does
Does it?
not have any sort of initiate, respond, start of turn, none of that stuff.
Right.
It's just you have +4 armor and close 1, uh, which is pretty freaking good.
Sure.
That's 4 more life, and by the same token that we said earlier, like if you're expecting to trade or you're expecting to lose, cool. This is just more life, more time.
Right.
But yeah, so you've got a bunch of little closing tools. Once you get to range 3, you've got the normal tools of slash, dive, which I'll grab, uh, area shift if you're feeling greedy. I say that because pulling without pulling the opponent past you means that you have to spin the gauge to cancel.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not very efficient. Yeah, you've
So
got these and you've got
ki
this.
kind of similar to Kara Cancel, where it's like if you could take the time and do it a turn later, maybe save your area shift for when you can actually go gauge neutral on it. But if
Mhm.
you need to strike them now, that's kind of what
Yes.
area shift could be for. Okay.
Yeah. Like, probably my most common area shift cases are we're at range 5 or greater, and I go, okay, pull 2, and now I'm striking with
With
my range
slash.
3 slash or my range 4 dive, and I'm gonna get
Sure.
in your face.
Sure. Makes sense.
Um, but if you're at 3, then you could probably just play something. If you're at 2, cool, area shift them into the corner, or honestly, it's not the worst to pull them out of the corner as long as you're getting the gauge off of it.
Getting
Um,
gauge and maintaining your mix up is fine.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so like area shift is a tool. Um, You're also allowed to play cross, but I'll talk about your normals later, or like
Okay.
how you use each normal later.
Sure. Sure.
And then the other attacks, excuse me, that move you in are these things, which look pretty different from the normals. They they're so Slidehead is a range 1 to 8 with 0 power.
Yep.
This is unusual to say the least.
That does look different than a normal. Yeah.
It does not even slightly resemble any normal.
No.
If you wanted to pick one, you might say Sweep because it's good at hitting and it's only speed 2.
Sure.
But and it has a hit and it has a random discard effect. Uh, so it's got a lot of sweep things on it, but sweep has a very large red number on it, which is 6,
Right.
and this one has a 0.
Right.
Uh, that's pretty different. So what Slide Head generally is your I'm at range 4 or greater. Uh, I can hit this button anytime I want because what are they gonna do? Like now, some characters will have projectiles that are actually competitive with it, but what it mostly is a way to say that I'm going to take a little bit out of your hands, a little bite out of your hands, close 2 spaces and gain a gauge.
Right.
And those are all very useful things to do. Um, at range 1, this says, okay, I guess maybe you can play a grasper across, but I'm not really going very far away.
Right.
I'm still gonna get in.
Right.
Um,
It's almost like Tatsu like at that point. Like
mhm.
you're following up or guarding through their fast option and maintaining your range.
Yeah, like you're at close range, you're expecting to take a hit and to do basically no damage, but just to
Right.
maintain position.
Right.
The fact that you can reliably get gauge off it is probably its most useful feature. Where even at range 4 or greater, nobody can really get out of your reach.
Right.
Like you can just hit them, and that gives you meter, and that can be used for cancels, which is extremely useful.
And at sort of mid ranges, like you said, 4 or greater is where Slidehead is kind of at its best. At mid ranges, you would probably rather just play Steadfast because that little
Exactly,
advance and making your sort of mid range things more threatening is what this boost is for.
exactly.
Got
Yeah,
it.
on the
Okay.
face of it, you might say that the after close 2 makes this feel like you should play it at range 3, but the card shape does not actually shake out like that because if they play a dive or a dust, or if they wild swing one of them, they will dodge you and or stun you,
Right.
and you'll get nothing out of it. Uh, that's pretty awkward. And if they are initiating, you absolutely should not respond to this at range 3 unless you know that they are playing some sort of low damage projectile
Sure.
because they can play a sweep and it stuns. This does
Yep.
not have 6 defense. This is 5.
It's 5. Yeah, it's not quite as safe as it looks for how slow it is.
Exactly. Even at range 1, like if they initiate, this is a risky thing to defend with
Right.
because you can just get stunned by a sweep, and that's not so good.
Right. Makes sense.
Yes. So it's a viable play at range 1 to catch the really fast options like Grasp or Cross. It is usually more useful at range 4 or greater. At range 2 and 3, you will almost always play this boost. At range 2, you go to range 1 and you have some scary stats to threaten. At range 3, you go to range 2 and the same principle applies. They're not super likely to want to let you initiate with +1 speed at range 1 or range 2.
Right.
So that's Slidehead. It is very much a utility card. It is not really part of the mix-up per se, because what it gives you is not a one strike. It gives you some other stuff. Uh, Hammerfall, also not a card that tends to win strikes. 2 power. Um, well, let's check our breakpoint math. +1 is 3. That's okay. Not that important. I guess technically it stuns EXs if we care about EXs that are speed 2 or less and have no printed defenses, which we don't.
Right. Which we
Uh,
don't.
Yep, and then in Exceed mode, it goes to 4 power, which still doesn't even break faultless defense. Yeah, we don't care.
Right.
Right, so this
Sure.
this neither of these with the ability care. The breakpoints that these hits with the ability don't tend to matter. And Hammerfall being this slow and doing this little damage is not likely to stun anything ever. Um, and that's fine. That's not its job. Its job is to be a thing that has close 3 and a bunch of defenses on it. So you can say, okay, Slidehead wasn't a thing that was good enough. Hammerfall probably is. I'm going to close one more space. I'm going to still have an armor. I'm going to get in. Right? You can play it at range. Let's just say yes. You can play it at any range.
Yep. Yeah, basically, because again, it sort of works the way that a Tatsu would, where uh, many of the things, maybe not everything at 3 speed, but many of the things that are faster than it are not going to break it, and
Yep.
the things that are slower than it, okay, well, you're probably going to trade down, but you're doing 2 damage. You were going to trade down anyway.
Yes. It's not a thing that you're playing because it's going to win combat. It's a thing you're playing because it has close 3 on it.
Yeah.
So at
Okay.
range 1, you play it and you go, okay, they can't cross. Right? if they try to cross, they back themselves up against the wall, and I'm at range 1, and they're extremely sad.
Sure.
Um, Now at range 2 and 3, it becomes a very dicey thing to defend with because then it just loses hard to dust.
Yep.
Because loses speed tie, gets stunned, you're sad. But at range 2 and 3, the boost really shines. So
Yep.
much like
So
with Slidehead, we have the same
very,
dynamic.
very similar. Yeah. So anywhere except for 2 and 3, great, great movement attacks, great grappler movement. At
Yep,
2 and 3, these really, really come online.
yep. At range
Cool.
5 and greater, you will prefer Slidehead because it actually gets you a gauge, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but you have Hammerfall if you're out of Slideheads. Like it is a thing that exists for some redundancy because that's a situation that you need to not be in very much, or you can't do anything because you're not a character who is designed to win the game at range 5 plus.
Sure.
Um, it's not really your identity. But yeah, so these are your like, well, I guess all of these are things that will get you in. I talked about carry cancel as well, but it has that property of being ungrew to impacts, so
Yep.
use it when you have to. Be a little cautious, and then this boost also being kind of a thing that you can use to step in.
Right.
You may notice I've talked about a lot of ways to get in. Um, yes, you need them.
You
You
are
will be
going to
using
need
them.
them. Yeah.
And I'm
What
not even done, but go ahead.
what about the move action? I'm assuming because another thing that we've sort of talked about, you mentioned very briefly at the beginning that grapplers have bad neutral, and in Exceed that frequently means they also have bad economy. I'm
Mhm.
assuming that the price of force efficient movement, even if it is like over a couple of turns, is probably a, something you need to consider. Like I'm going to dump my whole gauge in to run at you.
It's the thing that you okay, so you can do that. You will often prefer to take one step using these efficient buttons, right?
Right. Right.
Um, if you need to take 3 steps, you've got this boost. Um, oh, sorry, where's the other? Oh, there it is. Yeah, one step. Anyway, you need to do 3 steps. You got this. Uh, but if you need to move like 3 or more, you're likelier to just strike with one of these because
Right.
you're far enough away that you just want the movements and you can get it. Um, so the walk action where you absolutely must get to range 1 from range 3 or greater, uh, and you don't have a way to strike with it, it can come up, but I wouldn't be looking for it to be a thing that you do super often.
Okay.
Going from range 3 to range 1 by like discarding an ultra is sometimes a thing you'll have to do, but it means you are certain that range 2 is not going to be fine for one turn. Where
Right.
you go, okay, range 2 with 3 armor is pretty good.
It's often
Uh,
fine, right? And
yeah,
again, something that you taught me in the Tager guide is that you need to be sort of patient with when you're
yeah,
playing grapplers, and you need to be okay with saying, I could spend more to get from here to here, or I could say this is good enough for now, and I'll make up the difference next turn.
right. Like fundamental to how Potemkin plays is the idea that the opponent doesn't get to set the pace of the match. They can try all they want, but you can ignore them.
Right.
You just shrug them off.
Mhm.
You're not going to be playing at a super high rate, fast pace. Excuse me. There you go. High pace. Anyway, fast pace. Uh, but they can't make you play at a fast pace because
Right.
them attempting to do so just means they walk into +3 armor, +4 armor, +4 guard, whatever it is. And if they ever end up at range 1 and it's not their turn, they explode.
Right. Right.
Um, like it's hard for them to rush you, and it's very easy for you to at a pretty low resource cost, just like drop a card, take a step, get some stats, draw for end of turn. Same number of cards overall. Wait for your opponent to do stuff. If you are not in a good position, you can just wild swing and say, "All right, I'm gonna take a little less damage thanks to my armor," or just let the strike go south and then play with the rest of my hands. Don't worry about it,
Right.
because once you get here, you wreck face.
Right.
Uh, so yes, you'll be patient, and your opponent will be rightfully horrified because every step you take toward them, um, well, it's a death knell. Uh,
Absolutely.
all right. So why range 1 is awesome. Lots and lots of ways to get to range 1, and I mentioned there's still one more, but wait, there's more. This one.
When you exceed, of course, you have a kicker.
When you exceed close 2. So that means your 4 gauge exceed cost is actually kind of a 2 gauge exceed cost that packs in a 2 force walk action.
Right.
Um, so I was talking about going from range 3 to range 1. Well, hey, look at that. This goes
This
from
is
range 3 to range 1.
and also makes you stronger and scarier for the rest of the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, So that's your go-to if you can get it. And as I said, you should expect to be able to exceed, or you should expect to exceed in more than half the games you play. Cancels are awesome and they're addicting, and you need to not overuse them, but it's hard not to overuse them.
Right.
Uh, they are going to be a significant drain on your gauge because you will often feel like, well, this cancel lets me do exactly what I need, and it's going to work, and that's true. But keep in mind, you are Potemkin. You might not need to do that right now. You might just be able to play something else and still not lose, and then build up your resources because you get to 4 gauge. This turns on, and now every gauge you get is a weapon of mass destruction. Um, like you know, you throw a badass onto the succeed ability and you nuke the world. It's completely ridiculous. Um, I mean, even at range like range one, assault, also known as slash, notably like awkward janky play, mostly used to bait out a block, is something that turns into a 7 power 3 armor attack that just doesn't lose to anything.
That's an ultra.
Um, yeah, like it's ridiculous. So
Yeah,
your exceed
that's
mode is amazing.
insane. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
and so I am it's not that I'm gunning for that because Potemkin doesn't really gun for things. He's moving pretty slow. But
Yep.
I need to when I'm looking at uh I have the
Anytime,
option. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, anytime you're tempted to cancel,
Right.
think carefully.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Like think about how much it's setting you back because the cancel can be amazing, but you don't if you're canceling in a way that's going to actually like net lose you gauge because you're not about to hit with a strike or something.
right.
Eh,
Like
careful.
I have the option between playing an obvious one that doesn't have any sort of additional stats in the way. I have the option between playing these two boosts in this position or this position even maybe. And I'm like, "Oh man, close one, draw one, cancel into range one strike is everything I've ever wanted in my entire life, not
Hmm.
just an exceed." Probably play this one anyway because it'll get you
Probably.
most of what you want. You won't save the gauge. I mean, you would love to play this as an attack on range one too, so that muddies the math even more. But just in
Hmm.
general, be
Yep.
okay with going a little bit slower um,
Yeah.
if you can save gauge.
Yeah. Like I'm a player who tends to love pressuring my opponent, forcing them to play at my rate. And I usually do that by playing characters who are able to accelerate the game. But
Yeah,
Potemkin is one who does it by slowing the game down.
and forcing you
Um,
to play at his pace.
yep.
Okay,
He says you can play at whatever place so you can try to play at whatever pace you want. I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to take it slow. And as I
right,
do, I'm going to inexorably become this unstoppable wall of steel.
sure,
Uh, and yeah, the go-tos for that are the ultra boosts. All of these little take a step boosts are in that vein. But the ultra boosts
right,
are the ones that also say you have some sort of armor, so the opponent can't even really hope to hurt you when they initiate
right.
to get rid of it. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are that's as you've said a couple times
Up,
why
uh,
range one is scary, and then how to get to range one, and that's kind
but
of what
wait,
we've.
there's more.
Yeah, tell me more about how to get to range
There's
one.
one more. There's actually two more, but there's one more that I care about.
Okay,
Um, this attack deceptively may be the best card in the kit.
okay,
Um, it's not a big range one payout. It doesn't even hit at range one.
right.
Uh, it's not even impressive in terms of its power value. It doesn't have an 11 on it. It's got a 4 on it. 4 is not a cool number.
It's not.
Um,
It's 7 less cool than 11 is.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
way less. It's not exciting, right?
right,
Um, its speed is 1, so obviously you're not outspeeding anything. That's not a thing you're even thinking about. Uh, but this has some very, very funny properties. Uh, attacks at range 4 and greater don't hit you, is the reason I was mentioning that like this is even less relevant. You have another way to say that your projectiles are not important at all.
right.
And then after, close 3 and gain advantage.
And
Uh,
what is stunning this at range 4? What is hitting for 7 8 for I'm sorry, for 8 damage at range 4 that would
mhm,
prevent you from having that after? So, but D, this loses to dive,
mhm.
except you still gain advantage.
I was gonna
They're at,
say
and they're at
they're at
range
range
1
1
to
and it's
you
my
now.
turn. I didn't
Yeah.
lose.
Yeah, I would spend 2 gauge to do that any day.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not a reliable button at 2 or 3. It loses to dust, the
Yes.
ignore armor and guard. and it will lose to a lot of character-specific analogs to dust. Things that are, command grabs, things with ignore guard and at least 4 power.
Right.
Like, be wary of those things. But that's fine. At range 1 or at range 4 plus, all the way to the edge of the board, this is uh, slightly inefficient movement where you go, okay, I'm paying 2 gauge and 2 force to close 3, but I didn't pay a turn on it.
Right.
Which is kind of like you walked and then you canceled, where you paid 4 total resources to take 3 steps forward and to still have your turn.
Right.
Um, if you kind of the math is janky if you look at it that way, but yeah, the value of this after effect is kind of ridiculous, and the fact that it's extremely stable, it's extremely secure. Your opponent probably can't do anything about this. It also counters a bunch of advantage shenanigans that various characters can have, where they tried to advantage chain you and you said no, actually it's my turn, and we're at range 1.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's pretty tough to steal advantage from a speed 1 attack. To
Yep, you are
underspeed
almost certainly slower.
yeah, and steal advantage back. Right.
Yep, and you want to be slower with this. You want to make sure that your after gives you the advantage after they've done all their stuff, because they'll have advantage, and then you'll take it away from them. There's a
Right.
rules clarification. That is how that works. If somebody plays slash, they gain advantage. Then you have this thing that gains advantage. The person who has it last is the one who still has it. So they don't.
Right.
It's not their turn next. It's yours.
Right.
Um,
It's passed back and forth between you.
yes, the
Yeah.
last person to gain it is the one who has it.
Right.
But yeah, so Gigantic Eye is a remarkable utility card that does not really win the strike generally, but it wins the next one.
Right.
It
And it
tends to win
might
the next one really
it,
hard,
it might win you the game. Yeah.
and it very well may win you the game.
Right.
Um, the dangerous thing about it is that if you use it as a like, I'm at range 1 and I'm just going to make sure that I have the next turn and I have a bunch of stats on you, then it's actually costing 2 gauge and you're probably not hitting, and that hurts you in the gauge economy realm.
Right.
Um, That's a little dicey. It's also an issue to play at range 2 and 3. I already mentioned that. That's not very safe.
Right.
Uh, it's also at range 2 or 3, people are very likely to want to cross away from you, and unless they're right up against the wall at that point, then you'll miss and you'll close, and you won't be at range 1 with advantage, and that makes you kind of sad.
Right.
Um, and they still hit you, so they still got gauge. They didn't do any damage, but like you don't expect
Yeah.
to take that much damage anyway. You're Potemkin.
It other than dust, or yeah, other than dust, it doesn't have like the lowest worst cases in the world, but there are, you are a gauge hungry character and you're probably not getting very much gauge over the course of a game.
Yeah, so like despite this being a thing that works in almost every situation, it doesn't mean you should always throw it out in every situation.
Right.
Um, but if you're ever in a situation where you need something that works, then this is here for you.
Right.
Um,
And
mhm.
again, in that situation, like you described it with where did our uh
I've thrown cards all over the place here.
when you were describing steadfast and ba, 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 huge, um in the situation where this loses super hard to dust and you'd be incredibly sad, uh +4 armor now close 1 is great.
Hmm.
Now you
Yep,
assault in and you're probably completely safe.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
So
And
that that paradigm of like, if you're at a super far range strike, if you are at kind of a mid-range boost, is sort of something that seems to hold throughout a lot of his kit.
mhm. Yep,
Okay.
and that's because the of what you referred to earlier as grappler movement, right? Which is kind of the nickname that we use uh, it for movement that goes off regardless of whether you hit. So these after close 2 and this after close 3, where you just go, I'm not playing this attack as an attack, right? It looks like an attack, but I'm actually playing this to move.
Right.
So that's the
And
so-called grappler movement phenomenon, and he's got it in spades.
right.
Um,
And in the times where that's at its most valuable is at the more extreme ranges. And pretty
mhm.
consistently, it seems like if that no longer is as safe as it would be at extreme ranges, you have a boost that fills in a gap that you can then use to close in further some other way.
Quite right.
Okay.
Yeah. Gigantic going from 2 to 1 is wonderful. Going from 3 to 2 is a little less impressive, because at 2, people are a lot likelier to have something that will diffuse it. Depending on the position, that might be cross, that might be dust. Um, this is a card that you might sometimes just pay as 2 force to go from 3 to 1.
Okay.
Um, that's a that's a thing that I would be reluctant to do, just because 4 armor is a ton. If you can actually make the 4 armor matter, then you have 4 more life in the game. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Um, yeah. So even though going to 1 is unambiguously good, you're Potemkin.
Right.
Um, think about ways that you can leverage the value of this and make opponents spend more to chew through your life bar,
Right.
because the more they spend, well, the other factor of this, the more cards your opponent spends to do things, the more information hits their discard pile,
Yep.
the more you know about what they can't answer. And at that point, if your mix-ups ever stop being mix-ups because they just win, then they'll die.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if they're out of answers, if they're out of dives and they can't cross away, then this just wins.
Yeah,
And
and you
yeah.
don't need to win that many times to win the game.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. Not quite like Strive, where if I recall correctly, about 3 Potemkin busters, depending on the character, might just win the game.
Yep.
In Exceed, it takes a little more than that, but not many. It takes about
Not
4.
yeah, not that much more.
uh, and that's impressive.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
but yeah, so your centerpiece offensive threats are Garuda Impacts and Potemkin Buster. Of course, Potemkin Buster. I mean,
Yep.
it's got Potemkin in the name. You should
Yep.
expect it.
Yep.
And then your most remarkable utility button is Gigantorkai, which I can't
Okay.
pronounce anything. Anyway. Um, okay, I think I'm finally out of the ways to get to range one sets. I'll talk about the last one that isn't real. Um, this is not an attack you should play at range 4. Usually, like, you better be very sure that your opponent has no way to evade this, because
Isn't playing assault, isn't playing dive,
assault,
isn't
dive, or cross.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, you generally don't want to play this as I'm going from range 4 or 3, heaven help you, where it loses just to dust.
Yeah.
Um, and you're going to range 1, because many of these lost cases are much worse than they look. I will demonstrate. Right. So in this board state, you play this, and they play dive, and you have paid 4 gauge and an ultra to go to range 3 and pass turn.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Which
Uh,
which you love range 3 famously.
yeah, like, it's not the worst range for you, but boy, you sure wanted to be at range 1, and it would have been a lot
Yeah.
easier to go to range 1 just by paying this and one of those gauged, but with the walk action if you absolutely had to do it, like,
Yeah. You
ugh.
you 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 love being at range 1, you are okay with being at range 3, but also you love having 4 gauge and now you don't have it anymore.
Yep,
Right.
yep. That's a costly mistake. Um, yeah, Heavenly Pacific Buster does have an important use case. There's actually 2 of them. Um, one is, uh, and I'll note the flaw with this, right? So one important use case is your opponent is cornered. You can initiate with it, and they die.
Yeah.
Um,
They can't grasp. Uh they can dive, but that has the same
that's the
mechanics
flaw.
as yeah.
Yeah, is that dive is the answer to both of these.
Right.
And if you don't have a bunch of ways that to cover dive, they're pretty likely to just do it, and then you have taken an immense risk. And if they actually dive, then oh
Right.
no,
Th-
like
it
at least you end up at range 1, but you sure paid 4 gauge and an ultra. Like, ugh.
this isn't a mix up basically. Like these
Right.
are covered by the same thing. Ryu can mash the same button to get out of it.
Mhm.
It makes it when you have 4 gauge, maybe it makes it way freer to hit Garuda Impact, and that's awesome. But
Only if people actually think you're likely to play this, which they're
they might
not for
not
the
be.
reasons I've already described.
Right, right.
Um, yep. Uh, that's one important use case and one important flaw of that use case. Let me note that uh, 2 and 3 probably don't even consider it because losing to dust here is crippling.
Yeah.
Um, if they're out of dust, 3 is still iffy because losing to slash
Yep.
is also crippling
Yep.
because you
Still
took the
bad.
corner and now they can leave, and yeah. Um, like, there's a lot of problems with initiating 2 and 3. 4, I also mentioned the worst case here, really, really bad.
Yep.
But why in the world would you play it at 5, you ask?
Oh, yeah,
That's
huge. Of
why.
course. Yeah, you get some extra range on it.
Yes. So if at 5 you put this in play and your opponent does not realize that Heavenly Potemkin Buster is a range 2 to 5 projectile, um, under this exact circumstance. Oh, sorry, hold on. I think, yeah, I did that right, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, 2, yeah, because 1, 2, 3.
Yep. Still
Yeah,
hits.
okay. That's how I had it in my head. But yes, a range 2 to 5 projectile where you are the projectile and it does about 11 damage.
Yep.
You can just delete them, right? Um, and that's nice. This is actually like a non-trivial use case just because people will often be wanting to get away from you, and if they're not paying attention, it's very, very easy for them to just leave themselves open to this.
Right.
Um,
And
that's
like
mhm.
similar thing about Gigantic Eye, actually same guard value even. What at uh what is going to be
Or are they
stunning this
stunning it?
at range? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like
and
7 is hard to stun for a projectile or for a dive, I guess.
yep, so yeah, things that are projectiles that push, you're still vulnerable to because they push you and then you miss.
Right.
Um, but if they are a movement reliant character, if they're not somebody who's pushing you away with projectiles or whatever, then this is very, very hard for most people to evade because the most movement most people are going to have in a strike is dive, where they advance 3 and you can still hit them.
And you still hit them,
Uh,
sure.
yep. So like if you end up in this situation because the opponent crossed away or because you crossed away to set it up, and the
Right.
opponent does not realize what's about to happen, they can just die. Um,
This is also a 5 gauge expenditure, and I'm assuming
uh, I'll correct that. You usually don't cancel
you
this.
you don't cancel this. Oh, okay. It works just as well on defense, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean,
That's
if you
true.
boost this at range 5, they can either move closer so that your huge is even better,
Right. And
or they can
yep.
stand under the gun.
Yeah, and if they move closer to you, you're like, "Cool, I'm Potemkin." I love that.
Yeah. Like
Gotcha.
they increase the number of things that are threatening them by moving closer.
Right.
What they want to do is they want to ukemi or tech or something like that.
Sure. It's not they're not being threatened if they move to here. They're not being threatened by Potemkin Buster in particular as much anymore. Heavenly Potemkin Buster as much anymore. But
Y-
oh, the rest of your kit is still awesome here.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, you usually don't need to cancel huge. It's joining the list of things that you'll cancel if you have to. You'll cancel if you need to, but
Right.
you
Right.
well yeah, Kara cancel and uh I guess arguably that one, but you don't even play that one most of the time.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you'll cancel it if you need to, but it's probably fine to just play it, um, and see what they do.
Okay.
Like be patient, right? That's the thing.
Yep.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, this is rare, not even for the reasons like that it's easy to play against if the opponent is paying attention, where they can just not be in range of that and hang out closer, where they are liable to die from other things. It's rare for the reason that how did you not play Burly Hard earlier,
Yeah.
right? Uh,
Yeah. I mean, when you were describing all of the ways that you take a step forward and be scary, this is the most impressive and scariest one.
It's awesome. It is a
Yeah.
very, very good boost. It is a boost that you are pretty much always happy to play. Not unlike Armorclad Faith, which is the other
Right.
ultra boost.
And
Um,
also because this is not a 5 gauge expenditure, but it is a 4 gauge expenditure to play this. You have a 4 gauge exceed cost. You aren't generating a ton of gauge. This is an either or kind of
mhm.
situation, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. You should not expect to be in the situation where you can play this in Exceed mode. If
Right.
this happens, your opponent should have already taken lethal damage. Like I
A
don't know how
couple
you get 8 gauge and didn't kill them.
a couple times over, yeah.
I guess if faultless and engage went to gauge, then you might
Right.
be able to get 8 gauge without killing them. But you deal with
Yeah.
so much damage.
Yeah. That's probably not gonna happen. So you'd better be sure that this is gonna benefit you more than uh, having this for most of the game would, or for as much of the game as you could have it,
Mhm.
would benefit you. Your exceed mode.
Yeah. So for that reason, HPV Heavenly Potemkin Buster is not a super common play.
Sure.
It it sure has numbers on it, but
Yep.
there's only two setups where you are likely to use it. One of them it doesn't present an additional mix-up threats. The other is still pretty pricey, especially the opportunity cost of paying the 4 gauge on it.
Right.
Um,
But as you
so
said, it is fairly easy for your opponent to leave themselves open to this by accident, partially because it's not a particularly uh, common play.
yeah, it's not something people are likely to be thinking about a lot as a thing that they need to worry about or not let you set up with. So they'll do a thing like cross out to the corner, and then you'll go, oh, I guess you're at range 5, and I have 4 gauge. I was going to exceed, but I'll play
Yeah.
this now.
Yep.
Um, like okay. Um, there's also there's also a tendency among some players, not everybody does this, to go, okay, my opponent has some big threat, and I won't worry about it because if they make it too obvious, then I can block.
Right.
Uh, you are not subject to that. Um,
Oh, another
here's why.
boost.
It's almost like your boost game is incredibly important to your character.
Yeah.
Anyway, Megaton Furioso is just you can't block.
Right.
I have plus power to nor armor. I shred any defenses that you tried to have.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, yeah, this is the thing that is kind of the capstone of like my payouts are world shattering, where
Right.
you can, if you already are in a good position, if you already have a good mix up, you staple this on and you say, I win the mix up, I win the game.
And
Here's
generally,
my range 1 8 power sweep.
as we've been talking about some of these things where we've been saying like this loses to only dive. This beats dive. Like when we've been talking about like what normals it beats, this beats focus. We've sort of like had in like small text afterward this entire time. It's been like, or they could block, or they could block. They can't block every time.
Mhm,
And turning off block is an option in the same way that turning off dive is an option or turning off cross is an option by cornering them is what's going to probably win me the game.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also what lets you make anything a 2 gauge ultra, or well, I should say these 2 cards. Um,
Badass
because
and Megatona.
yeah, Badass Megatona, even if you're not at range 1, is +2 power, ignore armor, +1 speed, +1 armor, +1 guard. Pretty nutty.
Yeah.
But if you are at range 1 and or are in exceed mode, this means that you have turned any card you want into a 2 gauge ultra that wins. Um,
Yeah.
like what
So
are the actual numbers on range 1 slash here? It's speed 6, power 8, ignore armor,
ignore armor.
and
Yeah, that's an
3
ultra.
3 armor, 1 guard.
That's an ultra.
That's not even an ultra that like you could legally print. That's a really really stupid ultra.
Yeah.
Um,
At 2 gauge, and then I guess you're also spending 2 cards on it.
two
So like call
force. Yeah.
call it like 2.5 gauge for that much damage and advantage.
Yeah, it's like roughly a 3 gauge ultra or something to that effect. But yeah,
Yeah.
like the advantage at that point probably doesn't matter because you did 8 damage, they're dead.
Right.
Um, they couldn't block it.
They couldn't
Like
block it. Yeah.
that's it.
Okay.
But yeah, Megaton. So I've praised the defensive utility of Mega Fist, and generally the value of it having it as a redundancy for Slash, as a redundant option for Slash.
Right.
Megatona is the game is over and the opponent didn't know it. The
Right.
button. It is exceptional at in-game situations. You usually won't spend it earlier than that because it's a resource expenditure that you don't need to make. And as per describing how you are generally a patient character, yeah, don't waste it before you need it.
Sure. Sure.
But it means that your opponent can be thinking that they are safe because they're sitting on whatever number of life, and you go, well, actually, my grasp is 5 power ignore armor or 6 power ignore armor or whatever, and you're dead.
And you're dead.
Uh,
Right.
and that's what Megatona does. It ensures that you don't actually have trouble closing games, which is nice.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. And
Mhm.
so I think there's one card in the kit that we haven't covered at all
Oh, hey,
in
that would be the
in
other stuff.
in Heat Knuckle. Yeah. All right. Tell me about the
Yeah.
other
So
stuff.
yeah. So I talked about why you're terrifying at range 1. I talked about
Yes.
how you get to range 1 and your tools for doing that. And there's sure is a bunch of that.
Yep. Yep.
Um. All right. So Heat Knuckle is like okay. It actually has a printed power value on it, which you may notice that we have our printed power values of 6 and 5 over here, of
And then
0 and 2
two
over here,
two zero. Right. This is
and
the
3.
midpoint. Yeah.
And this sits on the high side. It is 5 instead of 4 or 3 or 2 or 0.
Right.
Um, so like it has a non-trivial power value on it. If you initiate at range 1, it turns into a pretty significant power value on it, where it's 6 or 7.
Yep.
It has 5 guard at speed 1.
Which
You
is
may note that that means
pretty
you
unsafe
can
for
never
yeah.
defend against sweep with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty unsafe even with I mean like we would like a speed 2 to be 6 guard, and this is focus
One
speeds
lower in both numbers.
at
Yeah.
way less than focus defenses, right?
Yep. Um, so it is a card that is only really particularly useful, like particularly safe, particularly reliable, if you are initiating at range 1. Um, because then it gets the extra 1 or 2 armor depending if you're in exceed mode. It
Right.
also gets enough power to be significant. And at range 1, it is actually kind of absurdly reliable because it has before if you were hit pull 2, without pulling past yourself, so it won't pull people out of the corner.
Right.
Um, so it covers cross and grasp in particular at range 1 in a very, very significant way. Um, it also has hit push 3, which means that if they're not in the corner, it actually kind of makes you sad.
Sure.
Because you just kick them out to range 4. And that's not what you wanted. Um, so it's a tool you can use to kind of bully people in the corner. Buying yourself time to draw into the other cards you actually want to play is like the way I can put that.
Okay.
Because it is not itself like the payout for it is actually comes with a significant drawback unless you're already in an advantage position, in which case it is a filler card where you can go, okay, they're cornered at range 1. I think they can cover, you know, this, and that, and the other.
Right.
Well, playing this doesn't cost me any of the mix-up threats that I actually need in order
Right.
to maintain, in order to lord things over them. Um, the other, or I should say, my main use case for this card is not that. I play this card when it seems like it should be much worse, which is I play it at range 2, where it's suicidal, or I
Right.
play it at range 4 or greater against projectiles.
Okay. Sure.
Um, at 5 or greater in particular, the reason I like to play this card is because it doesn't get stunned by most projectiles, and it pulls 2.
And then
And
whiffs.
that's enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't get the push effect that would make you sad.
Yep. I will deliberately miss with this card if I can help it.
Okay.
Just to get that pull effect and then
Yeah.
be at a closer range.
And
Uh,
when your lost case, if they dive in instead, your lost case is that you trade and do 5 damage. You're like, okay, that's like that
yeah.
seems all right.
Yeah. Like I didn't gain positioning, but I got another gauge.
Yeah,
Like that ain't bad.
yeah, could be
Um,
worse.
yep. It is nice that if they're cornered, then you aren't going to kick them out of the corner because it won't pull past them.
Right.
Um, but I find that the case of some silly weird thing happened with our movement, like I don't know, Ryu played Tatsu, jumped over me and hit me, and now I'm gonna kick him away. Like
Right.
this has happened to me often enough
That
that
can
I
still
don't
happen, sure.
yeah, that I
And
don't tend to run this attack at range 1 very much.
and the thing that you were saying, sort of the use case for this in the corner, though, when you're saying that like you're filtering their options for a mix up, it's like you were talking earlier about Heavenly Potemkin Buster and regular, Earthly Potemkin
Mhm.
Buster. These are covered by the same cards by dive in this situation. So is this, but you don't care if you whiff with this as much as you would if you whiffed with these two.
Exactly. It's the
That's the
lowest
idea.
investment way to
Okay,
play the thing that loses to dive.
I get you. Okay, I get you. And you'd prefer to not lose to dive, but if you're gonna lose to dive, you might as well lose to it with heat knuckle.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. Yeah, because
Yeah,
if I'm losing to dive, I don't want to drop a buster. I don't want to drop the heavenly by any means. I don't want to drop a sweep.
right.
Like I don't want to drop. Yeah, like this is fine. This is totally
You'll
acceptable.
and you'll at least pull them back in. Oh no, I'm sorry. If you were hit,
No,
you
I won't.
won't pull
No.
them back in. Okay, but
Yeah,
even that
I won't
is
pull them, but it won't push them. So
right. Even that is okay. I gotcha.
yep, it's okay. So this tends to be like an okay wild swing. It tends to be for me an anti projectile button.
Right.
The reason I said I like to play it at range 2, where I think it's suicidal, is because I will play it to hard call across, where they go from 2 to 5, and then I pull them to 3, and I
Right.
miss.
And you whiff. So
And it's
you've
my
just
turn now.
mostly like negated their cross.
Right, like, I put them square in range for Slash or Mega Fist, and it's my turn, so I can slash and have advantage at range 1, and they probably can't cross out because they just played
They
across.
just played across,
Uh,
sure.
so I'll use it as the hard call out for cross. It is, a little weird probably to do that, considering you actually have a thing that hits cross,
Right.
and also buys you 2 spaces of movement, but I've got better times to use Slide Head.
Yep.
Heat Knuckle is a card that I'm willing to throw into situations where I don't want to commit an actual resource, or I need to take the measure of my opponent, or I just, yeah, like
And you're okay with losing to Spike at range 2 with this because I mean, all
I
right,
didn't lose
5
anything else to it.
yeah, 5
Yeah,
damage is whatever.
yep. Now that said, yeah, and I'm defending at range 2. If I'm at range 2 and I have this card, I'm boosting it, no question.
Sure.
But yeah, but if they're initially at range 2, then it can do a number of decent things. There's also a fair number of like really fast like TPs where people have a speed 7 range 2 button where I go, okay, I may lose some positioning here. I at least got a gauge and I out traded them. Um, which although I don't super care about my trading values because I'm going to kill them when I'm ready to kill them,
Right.
it is nice that I am not falling too far behind in the race.
Yeah.
Because if you do get to the end of the game and the stuff that you need to kill your opponent with is super slow, then there's a non-trivial chance you have to worry about taking lethal damage before you actually get
Before
to kill them.
yeah, like it
Um,
doesn't matter if you're dealing 8, if you have 3 life and they did grasp you, oh, well, they didn't pull you out of the way of the Potemkin Buster, they just killed you instead.
yes,
Yeah.
provided
Yeah, yeah,
you didn't have armor. But
armor included, right.
yeah,
Yeah, add on a little bit more, they have Fierce down.
there you go. Yeah, things like that.
In order for my point to be valid.
Yeah,
So,
that is essentially the point I was making, though.
yeah, I
So
gotcha.
yes,
So that's the specials and ultras kit and a good amount of the normals. And just to recap really quickly because we have been jumping around a little bit. Uh Terrifying mix-up option. Excuse me, I don't want that in the deck. Terrifying mix-up option. Pretty much never play the boost. Um, Garuda Impact, incredible.
Or,
Also, mix-up option, keep both live. Great boost if you are dealing with a really footsies heavy character.
mhm,
Defensive stand-in for Slasher Assault. Draws you cards.
mhm.
You totally love that. Game closing boost. Um, these two, I'm sorry, yeah, these two are
Yeah, that's
both
true.
mid-range boosts, long-range attacks for closing in particular. They're your grappler
Mhm,
movement cards, and they're boosts that work great in the mid-range.
mhm.
Um, your other stuff, it's your projectile counter, it's various things, and like these ones, it also works well at range 2 to move into range 1, but there are some weird
Mhm.
kind of uh,
Yeah,
uh,
it's also a card you can just this can be think of this always as your lowest value card. You can pay
okay,
this as force on anything you need to.
right,
This is a card you can safely ditch or throw into a mix-up that you're uncertain about if you don't want to commit something else.
got it. Okay, and then uh, crazy big scary ultra. Probably just play it as a boost twice. Crazy positioning card at long ranges. Really great boost, just like these ones. Really great boost to close in uh, into the mid range with.
Mhm.
Is that a good like
Yeah,
2 second
that
summary
all
of this?
that all checks out.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then the normals, like we've been talking about some of them, and our sweep versus badass case, as always, is a tough call because there's great reasons to play both. But uh, sweep
I would say
into Megatona, I'm sorry, badass into Megatona is a specific thing for Potemkin.
yeah, that's a nightmare situation for your opponent. And I will
Yeah.
say specifically that if you can do it at range 1, you'll almost always play badass because the force multiplier it represents and come in conjunction with your ability is
Right.
completely nuts.
Right.
Um, like these two working together is ridiculous, which means
Right.
that that's usually not even a decision because you go from saying, "I can play the sweep that loses to some things and wins super hard other times," to I can pay pay a gauge. It's not free, but I can pay a gauge to play something that destroys the worlds.
Right. Yeah. That
Um,
that that wins against almost everything that they can do.
mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then slash really great boost for obvious reasons.
Mhm,
Good bulk movement. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the normal boosts in a second here, so I won't, don't spend too
mhm.
long on it right now. But like, I also noticed that there's a lot of things that slash combos well with, where it just becomes a very consistent card when you put armor or guard or um kind of anything that you're doing stat wise.
Yeah.
Like this is just like a really great card to mash offensively,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
to get that advantage at range 1. Okay. And then anything I missed in kind of this quick summary?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, you didn't specifically mention the fact that I consider exceeding to be like part
Oh
of your
yeah,
game plan, and you
yeah,
should generally stick to it.
kind of priority one, right? And
Yeah, like
that changes the math on almost all of these things and makes them all a lot better.
mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's also cheaper than it looks because, your 4 gauge is basically 2 gauge when 2 forced to walk forward, and that
right.
matters a great deal. You do want to try to take advantage of that. You don't want to exceed, like,
If
any
you're
time.
exceeding at range 1 anyway, you like this is good. Strike at range 1, like
Yeah, at range
that's
1, you don't
fine.
need to exceed. You're
Right,
already winning. Just keep
right.
winning. At
All
range
right,
2, it's a decision. At range 3, you probably should do it.
just do go ahead and exceed. Now you're scary.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Do we want
Mhm.
to cover some of the other normals?
Yeah, I'll just talk briefly about their significance to you in particular as Potemkin.
Sure.
Um, alright, so first thing I should mention is that this card is deceptive as it is with every grappler, because at range 3, people will expect you to play Slash because of how incredibly good it is for you to play Slash,
Right.
which means that you can catch them with Dust deceptively often.
Yeah.
So get away with it. It's robbery, it's cheating, do it. Um, people will feel like they, uh, yeah, they'll feel like they got cheated because why did you play the Dust? It didn't improve your position. Um, well,
It improved your position by approximately 5 life and a gauge.
yes, and the gauge there is huge. But yeah, like and it's often a low value thing to play, but if you can win clean with it, then do it.
Right.
It's yeah. So important mix up thing at range 3. Making sure that you play it sometimes is essential to ensuring that people don't always play a thing that will actually hurt your slash.
Right.
Um, so it's so I guess it's a long way of saying it's as important to you as it is for everybody else. It's an important range
Right.
to be mix-up tool. It's just
And
that people will especially suspect you of playing Stosh.
right. And Faultless Defense also has some redundancy either in the foreguard from Steadfast or the sort of like delayed key charge from where did we put it? Engage.
Engage.
So
Yes.
there's some redundancy built into that boost. Doesn't mean you should never use it, but that's relevant as well.
Mhm. Yeah, like it's fine to play Faultless at range 1 if you need it to cover things. It's not your most exciting boost. It's not really even your strongest one because usually you would get more mileage out of one of your other stat boosts. But it doesn't cost you one of your other cards. This is a
Right.
card that does not hit range 1, so it's perfectly fine to get rid of it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so it's dust. That's kind of the short of it. Sorry, that's the long of it actually. Anyway, um, dive is dive. You probably won't use a Chemi all that often because if your opponent has a stat boost, you will probably do something that lets you shrug it off because you have more armor than anyone should need.
Right.
Um, and because of that, you will probably be reserving your dive for situations where you need to play it to move in, or where you get a chance to play, at range 3 a speed 5 dive because of steadfast or badass or whatever. Or it's just you're getting hit by projectiles, and so you play an armor clad dive where you just have 4 armor, but you're getting closer no matter what happens.
Mm.
Like you will probably play dive as an attack, just because Ukemi is not something that you're likely to need. Um, Now your mods may vary, right? There are opponents who will have tech bait. They will have things that you need to Ukemi.
Yeah.
Sure, fine, whatever, do that. But yeah, mostly dive is a good attack. It moves 3
Yeah.
spaces for only 1 card. That's pretty
Yeah.
efficient.
That's and on anybody that's pretty cool, but on Potemkin especially, that's like a game changer.
Yeah, it's great.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Let
yep.
me
So
bring
it's
Cross over
dive.
here as well. Okay. Sounds
Yes.
good.
Cross is an attack that grapplers don't tend to let. Wait, did I skip one? Oh, I guess we already talked about slash.
Yeah.
It's good. It's slash. Uh, oh yeah, I will say, sorry, as a note about slash, because I'm trying to contrast with other characters. A lot of people value dash in particular for the ability to get out of the corner. But if you're cornered at range 1, you're not the one who's cornered.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean you are, but you're not. Like, you're fine here.
Right.
Um, it's if you're here, maybe consider getting out of the corner, but you will probably just step forward with something. Like you're not likely to need dash to get away from anybody or even to get out of the corner. You're likely to need it to get close.
Right.
Um, so expect that. All right, that's no, no, no. All right. Most grapplers do not like playing cross. They will if they have to. But cross is positioning negative. It moves you away from your opponent. Why would you ever want to do that? Um, well, the truth is you don't. That is true. It is positioning negative. You don't like doing it. But if you have on deck slide head, then your doctor will write you a note that gives you permission to play cross.
You can do it as a treat.
Yes, as a treat, because having retreated out of their sweep or assault or whatever the heck they're playing, you can then gain gauge and move forward.
Yep.
And probably from a range that they're not going to interact with because you probably went out to range 5 now.
Right. Right.
If you don't have a follow up, be it this or just dash,
Right.
if you don't have some way to follow up from
or
range,
or Heavenly Potemkin Buster.
oh yeah, or huge Heavenly Potemkin Buster or something like
Right.
that. Like if you don't have a range follow up, probably don't cross out.
Yeah.
Um, it's you're risking losing too many consecutive strikes if you're just hoping that you will top deck the next slide head or whatever.
Sure. Sure.
Um, oh, I should talk about Wild Swing after I finish going over the normals.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Please.
Oh yeah, air shift, obviously good.
Yep.
It's as described previously, right? Your ideal case is to get the opponent into the corner and gain gauge. You'll sometimes have to do a case is where you're just bringing them into the range of something that you can threaten, and then you play something,
Right.
dive or slash or stuff. But you will probably not see the case of out of corner to range 2 because why would you ever do that?
Right. Right.
And only sometimes see the out of corner to range 1 because them being cornered, it's just easier to walk forward.
Right.
Like you don't need to do that. All right, that's area shift. Grasp. It's speed 7. That is an important property. It's not, in my opinion, a very exciting property for Potemkin, because if you're playing slower things, you probably just have defenses on them, and you don't really care if your opponent outspeeds you, because their faster things are probably not going to hurt you all that much.
Right.
However, sometimes you have to play the fast thing. Sometimes you have to play on curve. Grasp exists for that purpose. if it wasn't in your kit, then you wouldn't have on curve at range 1, and sometimes you have to.
Yep.
I'm probably sound audibly unexcited about this because this is 3 printed power, and I'd much rather be playing 6.
You have better things to
Um,
do at range 1 than grasp.
I have way more exciting things to do,
Yeah.
but sometimes you have to.
It seems like
Um,
it seems like it would be an okay defensive option at range 1 because if you're at range 1 and they're striking into you, it's probably to get away. And I mean they could be throwing you back with their own grasp, but you're not initiating anyway. And it's a range 1 option that works.
yeah, like it is used defensively, which is how a lot of characters will use grasp. Where you go, okay, if my opponent has any range 1 mid speeds, then grasp is the way I cover them.
Right.
Um, an EX grasp is also nice because it will cover the opposing grasp, and that's the surprise DP that everybody in the game has.
Yep.
It's like, oops, range 1 speed 8. Um, and yeah, but the main value of it, like it has that value defensively. I think the main value of it is in being able to say, uh, oh, you're dead.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you cannot do anything about Megatona Grasp because it has 4 to 6 or wait, yeah, 5 to 6 power, excuse me, um, and ignores armor. So the opponent drops 5 or 6 life. This says the game is over,
Right.
um, and that's an important function. I would rather kill them from like 8 or 9 with some other cards, but sometimes you have to do the thing that makes sense and works, even if it's a little boring.
Sometimes you hit
Uh,
them for 8 or 9 to get them down to 5 or 6 life in the first place.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you probably did.
Right.
Let's Rock is awesome. It is, however, a thing that commits to winning the next strike. And because you are a grappler, if you spend the turn playing Let's Rock, very, very like the chances are pretty high your opponent's going to try to do something to make sure that they do not lose the next strike.
Right.
Um, like usually if you're in a position where you're confident that this boost will pay off, your opponent's going to change that next turn, which
Right.
means that you would rather just strike with something instead of actually playing Let's Rock.
Right.
So Let's Rock is a little unstable for you just because you expect to lose most strikes and just win the other ones extremely hard.
Right. So
Um,
maybe in a situation like if you are playing something like Hammerfall or Slidehead at range, it could work. But in those
oh, it's
situations,
fantastic with Slide Head.
yeah, in those
Yeah.
situations, you probably want to be moving in a little bit more quickly, so you would feel bad about playing this. But hey, you get 2 gauge and you're doing a little bit of damage.
Yeah, the ability to stack this on Slide Head and just have, oh, I got pushed to range 6 or greater, but I'm getting 3. That is worth doing.
Right.
That is about the only thing that I consistently attach Let's Rock to, though,
Oh man,
is long range Slide Head.
I can be taught. I've had 40 of these lessons, and I saw a combo.
Yeah, and you correctly anticipated. That is I think I'm accurate in saying that's like the thing that I attach Let's Rock to when I play it. I often don't play it.
I've never been more
Um,
proud of myself, D.
very nice, very nice. All right, that's Grasp.
Yep.
Focus is Focus.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't really know why you would play Scramble. Um, you are threatening awesome mix-ups. You want your opponents to have to participate in your mix-ups and then lose them, and then have their soul be crushed by the despair and humiliation of that experience.
Right.
Um, Forcing them to Wild Swing is like you've decided that your mix-up isn't really good enough, which means that you didn't remember that you're playing Potemkin.
Yeah, you forgot.
Um,
You forgot that you were Potemkin.
yeah, like you need to have faith. The reason you play Scramble is because your opponent has a very specific setup, a very specific tool. You know they have it in hands, or which I guess you would have parried it, but whatever. You didn't parry it for some reason. I don't know.
Right.
Or you're certain that they have an EX in hand that they're going to respond with, and you go, I don't want to deal with your EX. But in most cases, if that's the case, you can just initiate with Focus at range 1, and you've got 8 defense.
Right.
Like most EXs can't do anything about that.
Right. Right.
Um, like no normal EX will be able to deal with that. Um, so I find Scramble not all that important with Potemkin unless you are specifically shutting down something that you are dead certain that they have in their hands.
Makes sense.
On which note, just parry it
Just
if you actually
parry
think
it
that's true.
instead. Sure. You have plenty of
Yeah,
armor. You probably don't need to block.
yeah. Block is nice because it's a pretty reliable way to get gauge,
Mhm.
but I've got a bunch of attacks that can hit from deceptively wide ranges. I often don't want to waste my time throwing block at things.
Sure.
Um, so I tend to prefer parrying to get rid of stuff that might be a problem, whatever character
That
specific
you
jank
just
I'm concerned about.
can't deal with.
Yeah,
And D,
yeah.
when we were talking about some of the special boosts, like this half of them you can't cancel at all. This half, there were some pretty specific times, like probably don't bother canceling it, don't bother playing it. Cancel it if you're gonna play it. probably cancel it along with
Always
badass to
cancel.
yeah to
Yeah.
make it super super brutal. For these ones down here, I'm assuming that if you're going to cancel any of them, it's probably other than badass, it's probably going to be dash or area shift.
That is correct, and I would say it's more common to cancel the dash, but it depends a little bit.
Okay.
Um, but yes, like I would affirm that. Like Ukemi situational because that's mostly a matchup thing anyway.
Right.
Uh, Faultless very situational, but maybe that's what you're doing. Maybe you're doing the range one Faultless slash that is like a canonical play.
Right.
Um, but canceling from dash has many cases where it's going to be useful.
Yeah.
And then canceling area shift has many cases where it's going to be useful. If you can do this area shift and cancel,
Yeah.
then that
That's
puts the fear in them.
that's worth the gauge, especially because you're going gauge neutral on it.
That is almost certainly worth doing. Yeah,
Okay.
pummel them. It's
And
good.
then you were going to, sorry for that quick interlude. You were going to talk
Yeah, you're good.
about wild swings with Potemkin.
Yes. Okay. So, as kind of previously alluded, right? You're expecting to lose most strikes. It's fine to wild swing. It's fine to say, I'm holding my hand because I need resources. I need to initiate on my own terms when I know what's going on, or I need to respond with when my opponent is initiating on my terms. Excuse me, because of the shenanigans.
Right.
Um, like I want to have a hand to respond with. I want to have a hand to initiate with. Whenever you're not fully committed to a strike, whenever you know that this is a strike that you're fine just kind of losing, you've got some 3 or 4 silly amounts of armor on things, it's fine to wild swing for that purpose. Um, I'm also perfectly fine with you initiating with a wild swing at range 1. Because
Sure.
as previously mentioned, all your cards hit. Well, okay. There, all your cards hit.
Right.
Um, Setting aside Dust, Dive, and Block. Um, and many of them are very good. Um, it's not usually going to be as strong as just playing the big thing from hand, especially if you have some sort of badass combo or other cancel combo that you can play from hands. But because it's so reliable, it's perfectly fine to wild swing an offense because your ability makes things really good.
Sure. And
Um,
so the more you're investing into a strike, the less likely you are to wild swing on offense. But if you're just like, man, this is filler, I'm in a good position, let's let this go. Maybe you get
mhm.
Potemkin Buster.
Right, right. So like there's a certain dynamic where some characters, this is my opinion, obviously, some characters can put enough stats onto something, and usually it doesn't take very many cards to do this, that they go, all right, I'm at my favorite range, got a little bit of stat boost. Now I'm going to start wild swinging because I'll probably be fine.
Right.
And I would say this is generally not a character you want to do that with because if you are committing resources to something, you need to win it because winning it means a like 8 to 9 or 10 life delta, something
And
stupid.
and it might be a
Uh,
while before you win another one.
Right. Like you
Right.
need to actually make sure that if you're committing resources, it's fine to just kind of throw away other strikes. I will also note something that I probably should have explicitly mentioned sooner. Um, you have, well, let's count them. 6 specials.
Yes.
That's one more than most people.
Yep.
Your
You
deck
have
is just a little bit less consistent at getting you specific cards. You are not going to be able to rely quite as much. It's a small difference, but it is a slight difference in how quickly you can go through your deck, how reliably you can get specific cards. This is one of the reasons you value redundancy.
right.
It's one of the reasons you want to be careful not to drop the big dumb threats because reshuffling is kind of a costly action where
Yeah.
now you have to go through your deck and it's still not super consistent.
And you
Uh,
might not get them again for a while, right?
Right. Um, but yeah, so don't consider your wild swings to be all that reliable, and especially on defense, your cards are actually, as we can see from the stat lines, kind of crafted to not be very good on defense because your ability does not trigger them.
Right,
Um,
right,
you don't get the extra armor. So unless you have a boost in play, and if you do have a boost in play, why aren't you playing from hand?
right.
Uh, but yeah, so don't hesitate to wild swing on the premise that you're a grappler and you're expecting to lose the strike. Don't rely on wild swinging as, I'm at my favorite range. My wild swings are probably good. Um, you have good enough cards that you should be able to win from hand if you're doing that, and just a little bit of resource investment amplifies that significantly.
Okay. That makes
That's my
sense.
take anyway.
That makes sense. And then the last thing that I was wondering on the subject of like sort of getting the cards in hand that you need, any mulliganing advice?
Sure. Well, the universal thing that I say about mulliganing, right, is you want to know what you're doing turn 1 and turn 2,
Okay.
and no matter which person's going first. Um, I personally like to have in my hands slide head because if they decide they want to go to long range because they chickened out and played across against whatever I did,
Right.
you have a source of free gauge, and that's great. Um, I'm also a big fan of having any of my step boosts. So there's
Slide head itself
oh,
is the other one. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, this is that one. I will sometimes turn one carry console, although I would prefer not to.
Right.
But yeah, any of these that say I'm going to range 3, and now we're at the range 3 mix up and exceed, and
And I have some
I'm
kind
at
of
least threatening to
I
have
have some
this.
kind of
But
advantage. Yeah.
yeah, and I have some kind of advantage, or I'm forcing you to do something about it. Whereupon people will often be tempted to crossway, which is why I like having the slide head, so that the next turn I can strike and they go, "Oh, you actually have something to do at range 6, or sorry, range
Right.
5. Oh,
Right.
shoot."
Right.
Um, yeah, so that's a thing I like to have access to early on for that reason. Any of these are good just because I can start to move in. Um, Dash is like it's useful late game, and it's also great as an opener where you can just go to range 1. So it's never a thing I mind having in my hands. I will keep it.
Okay.
I will tend to mulligan away stuff these like this one is iffy. If I have no other movement, then
Right.
I'll keep this. But
Right.
I'll mulligan these, which are awesome cards, but they're awesome late game cards. Um, Potemkin Buster is great anytime, but it's one of those cards where I'm not expecting my opponent to let me be in range to play it for the first like 4 turns.
Right.
Um, I don't need it in my opening hands, and it's actually a pretty decent defensive wild swing. Not the best, but decent. So if I'm sitting around at range 1 and my opponent initiates, then I'm fine having Potemkin Buster in my deck.
Right. That makes
Um,
sense.
like I'm not super happy to have Garuda in my deck at that point, but I also don't think I need Garuda right at the beginning of the game. So yeah, and then Mega Fist is the I want this at the end of the game.
At the end of the
Any
game,
sooner,
preferably. Yeah.
yeah, any sooner, and I'm holding this as a attack to use. And
Right.
between the two, I'd rather have the slash most of the time,
Right. That makes sense.
uh, just so I can have the offensive threat. I will almost always keep Hammerfall, kind of for the same reason as Slidehead. It's grappler movement.
Yeah.
Like whatever my opponent does, it'll let me move in. This is a pretty good card to play on turn 1. It does lose to dive, sort of. Um,
They
they're
they
at range 1 now.
they got to range one. Awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah, like it pays out 4 life, and if you initiate it, it pays out a turn, and that is probably a bit much. Um, that is a strike I wouldn't say you won if you initiated and all that happens.
Right.
But it's not the worst thing, and 1 dive being down means that your botbuster is that much stronger.
Right.
Um, uh, yeah, I will for the same reason as these cards tends to mulligan away my badass. Um, Grasp I am just never excited to see, so I will mulligan it.
Right.
Eh, but yeah, so I guess what it boils down to is a way more binary list than I expected, which is like keep these, uh,
And
mull
and
these,
throw those back. And then
and then
these guys up here. I guess dive is a play at range one or at turn one.
oh, thank you, I forgot these. Yeah, dive is a pretty viable turn 1. It's fine. Faultless is a perfectly viable boost to have, maybe not turn 1, but pretty early.
Pretty early,
So I'll
sure.
tend to have that around for that, and I don't care about block.
Right.
Uh, but yes, focus. It depends on the opponent. If they have pushy projectiles, and I don't get slide head or heat knock, that's a hammerfall. Excuse me. Then I like focus. Otherwise, I want to have it later in the game because it's a very good card that I expect I'm going to want to use.
Right. That makes sense.
And then area shift, I'm probably not going to need early game, but yeah. So yeah, somewhat to my surprise, I think I have a way more like concrete mulligan than I thought, where
Cool.
I will pretty consistently keep these and mold these.
And obviously there's nuance for matchups, but this is a great place to start. That makes sense.
Yeah, but yeah, you like your step boosts, you like your ways to get in. This should not be surprising, but it's worth remembering.
Right.
And you like your grappler movement attacks, which are also ways to get in.
Yeah.
Um, so that checks out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then anything else about Potemkin's kit, or do we want to close out on counterplay?
Can't think of anything in particular. Um, I'll give one thing. I don't think I said specifically. What did I say? What you do with heavily Potemkin Buster at range 1 if you're completely insane? Does that?
Uh I don't think you did. No, is it the UE exit?
No, it catches cross.
Oh my god.
So from here,
Okay. Yeah, it's a cross catcher. Yeah, it is. And
from here,
it doesn't hit there.
it doesn't hit, but if they play cross,
Yeah,
they die.
yeah, they die really hard. Oh,
All right,
man.
this may sound like a meme, but if people start crossing too predictably,
Yeah,
remind them that they can't.
yeah, put that
Um,
on your, like, exceed bingo card. Everyone do that at least once.
it,
That
it's it, the people who really like crossing out at range one,
don't
because they know how scary you are. I've had this work multiple times. Like this is more reliable than it looks. It's not a thing that I think you should usually do, but if you
right.
notice your opponent open themselves up to it, then go, oh, they have a
Sound
gigantic hole in their playstyle. Let's
sou
kill it.
sounds good, and then you make sure that they don't fall for that a second time.
Yep.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's the like it is actually a range one crosscatcher.
Yeah.
That is a very very big thematic point, but mechanically it's a thing that you should only abuse if your opponent shows that they're vulnerable to it.
Right, of course. That makes sense. So
Okay, so
those
counter
are the
or yeah.
Potemkin things. What's my opponent doing to stop them? And how can I sort of adjust my play to make sure that they can't stop me?
Well, and this might sound redundant with other stuff I've said about other grapplers, but there's a reason for that. You're a grappler.
Yep.
What you're doing if you're fighting against Potemkin is you're winning most of the strikes. Great. Make as many of those happen as you can.
Sure.
Like if you he's out of position and he's throwing away cards or wild swinging because he knows that he's not going to do anything of note until he gets in position. Pack as much value as you can into those moments. Like if you're holding on to your dash to get out of the corner when he's in your face, then put up a let's rock. So that's once he gets in your face, you can dash out and then hit him from range and get some extra gauge and some extra power
Right.
and a little bit of extra value, a little bit more momentum. Like try to keep ahead of him. You will not have trouble outpacing him. You'll have trouble making it matter to him because he's just kind of going to shrug, throw some armor on, walk toward you. Like he marches to his own beat, as it were.
Right.
Like uh, that's a well. Anyway, reference I'm not going to go into, but uh, get out of his face, obviously, and then try to squeeze some value into all of those exchanges that you can. When he is in your face, which will happen, you will not be able to stop this from happening eventually. Um, this like he's maybe not here, but he's going to be at range one sooner or later,
Yeah.
and he's going to have a turn where he can strike. Usually, if he goes to range one, it's a perfectly good time for you to strike. By the way, because now you are at least threatening the is it sweep, is it grasp, is it dive mix up on your side. Um, dive is a little bit risky, by the way, because you kind of need to have that as a defense against Potemkin Buster. Don't run out of those.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
like, but like his ability doesn't go up, so you can actually get full value out of a strike you initiate at range one. Um, Depending on the character, you might have a bunch of tools for that. Ryu certainly does. Maybe you don't. So that's fine. You still have normals. It's reasonable to do this. When he initiates at range one is when you need to think carefully about what you're doing. Often, the answer is play focus or wild swing, because you will not have a safe way to interact with that mix up.
Right.
And unless you are confident that you can call his mix up, and you're like, all right, I'm certain now. Like this is the slash. I'm gonna play a grasp. I'm gonna ping him for a little damage. I'm gonna establish some distance. Fine and good. I endorse people like playing their hearts if they can anticipate the mix up because that's how I play. I want to read my opponent's mind and then like crush their soul by demonstrating that I have read their minds.
Right.
Uh, that said, if you're not confident in it, or you will just die. You will just lose because the value differential is such that if you have like a 50-50 coin flip every time, well,
He
Potemkin
wins.
wins the game.
Yeah, of course he
Yeah,
does.
like
Yeah, because
he just gets way too much value.
he needs to win one third of the strikes, and you're letting him win half of the strikes.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
That is how the math is going to shake out. Not at all in your favor, and as that happens and he gets Gauge, it gets even worse for you
Yeah.
because Gauge is a ridiculous force multiplier for him as for most strike characters.
Right.
Um, like the ability to cancel and or the ability to exceed means that the math gets really really awful for you.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so initiate with into him fearlessly, and then for the most part, try to get as much out of your non-range one strikes as you possibly can, doing whatever it is your character is good at. Um, be perfectly willing to play bat or stat boost in anticipation of him taking, doing his thing where he just kind of takes a step, moves closer, puts something in play, and you go, okay, I knew he was going to do that. I knew he would have, whatever 4 armor or something. That's why I was holding my ignore armor boost. That's
Yeah,
why I was holding
I
my
now
push boost.
I have overhead. I have a way. I've got a way to dodge at range one or something. I've held
Yeah.
an answer in reserve.
Yep. And if you have no such answers, then focus is still tends to be reliable. I mean, obviously, pay attention to the math. If he throws this out, then focus is, or sorry, not this, this, then focus stops being good
Right,
because it's gonna get stunned.
right, right.
Um, but yeah, like focus is 7 defense, which means that in basic mode, it's hard for him to stun it. It's much easier in exceed mode, but at that point, you're already kind of in rough shape. Um, and if you don't have exactly focus, then your options are you either call the mix up or you wild swing to save your resources.
Okay.
And it is important that you think about your resources because uh, you can't afford to just walk away from him because he will chase you more efficiently. I mean, I guess Ryu probably can, but
But
most people.
Ryu's a special case, and even he you have a lot of boosts that don't just move you in, but also make you scarier.
Yes, yeah, even he can't just do this every turn because doing that every turn gives Potemkin some way to gain an advantage off of every
Right,
turn being one step because sooner or later it's going to be, oh, now Potemkin has plus 2 speed and plus 6 power, or sorry, plus 4 power.
right. And
Um,
now the game's over.
yeah, like it becomes a problem for you because sooner or later you hit the wall
Yeah.
and you have to do something else. But yeah, so anyone who's not Ryu will find it even worse to just try to run away from him indefinitely. He will eventually catch up with you. He will do it more efficiently than you. Um, the more resources you can conserve for making the plays that you need to make to get the most value out of whatever it is you're doing. And sorry, I can't be more specific. This is heavily character dependent.
Of course, of course.
Um, Play to your strengths as hard as you can because the thing is that Potemkin does not really care that much what you do to him. He's going to do his thing. He's going to do it well, but he's going to do it slow.
Okay.
So pursue your game plan, pursue it very aggressively for whatever your character does to get as much value out as you can, knowing that like Potemkin is going to do what he wants to do. He's going to play the game at his pace. He's not going to let you change that. So cramming all the value you can into the rest of the game is how you get ahead.
Right.
Like what you might well see is an in game where Potemkin has 6 life and you have 16, and it's even.
You're right.
Right?
And then you lose. Both of you will lose in as many strikes as each other.
Exactly. Where
Right.
it's like, okay, I can probably kill him in 2 strikes. And he can kill me in 2 strikes.
Yep.
Like that's what
Absolutely.
that means.
Yep.
And yeah, so be wary of that. As with most season 7 or sorry, Guilty Gear Strive characters, uh, because he loves Gage so much, look at making him whiff. You like playing Cross, you like playing Dusts, though be careful that you're not predictable with it because if he beats it clean, that's really bad for you.
Yep.
Um, trying to play things where it's not an exchange and you're just kind of tapping him and leaving or poking him at range is good for you. You probably can't stop Slide Head from hitting you. Don't worry about it. Like it will hit you. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Um, you unless you have a way to stop it, in which case fine and good. But most characters don't. Um, let's see anything else. Oh yeah, be aware of his movement patterns. So I mentioned before, right? Like if he has 4 gauge and he's hanging out at like range 1 and 2 because you're doing footsies, know that if you go to 3, he's going to
He's
flip
gonna
and be in
exceed.
your face.
Yeah. Every time.
Like virtually guaranteed, which might mean that you now have a window where you get to initiate and he has no gauge, and maybe you can take some clean wins and stop him from rebuilding.
Right.
Like it might not mean that, but it might. Similarly, if he's at range 2, you're not expecting him to strike, you're expecting him to step forward. So when you create range 2, expect him to either area shift you like that or take a step with some boost, and then be prepared to strike into any of the boosts that he might play. Um, to stop him from being able to initiate with him on his next turn.
Right.
Um, like knowing, oh yeah, and then the things where like, oh, at range 4 he's going to play one of these cards. At range 5 plus he's going to play one of these cards. Knowing those things will give you the most, uh, will give you an advantage in figuring out what things you can play against them in advance.
Yep.
Because a lot of his approaching is, I'll say it's predictable because it looks very similar, even if it's like 6 different cards. He's
They're
still
different.
doing
They're
essentially the
different
same thing.
cards. Right. Yeah. I'm walking forward with a boost, or I'm hurtling forward with a strike, and there's kind of two general shapes of those two things.
Right.
Right.
And so, knowing that those are generally what he's going to be doing, you can anticipate and set up something a little bit in advance of him. So that's like he might shrug off your hits, but it's going to be at a higher cost than he'd prefer because you're hitting not for 3, but for like 5 or 6. Um, yeah. All right. Anything else as far as that goes?
Well, no, that all makes sense.
Yep. Yeah,
I'm
don't fear his mix-up, by the way, because you won't have a choice when you're at range 1. Like, you focus is the thing you play or you wild swing, but you expect it. Accept it, don't panic.
right.
Uh,
Right. He's running his offense on his turn. It's your job on your turn to do your offense better.
yeah, yeah. If you panic into him and go, "I have to play this because I'm so afraid of this one card," and then you call it wrong, you probably lost the next 3 strikes, which means the game is over.
The game is
Like,
definitely over. Right.
you can't panic and throw away stuff that is a necessary part of your defense,
Right.
so save your resources.
Yep. No, that all makes sense. And on Potemkin's side of things, as you said, his game plan doesn't really change. You might value a card slightly more or slightly less because they have an ignore armor option or something changes, but like
Mhm.
the general shape of his plan is forward, right? Is the
Right.
same regardless.
Yeah, yeah, the thing the counterplay, like, the thing the little fulcrums, the levers, the things that change in Potemkin play as he watches you play against him effectively is where he goes, "Oh, okay. I now need to sometimes play this unusual thing or this mix up. I need to sometimes play the range 1 Gigantor or
Right.
play the range 4 Heat Knuckle or play the huge Garuda at range 3."
Right.
Like, he's going to you have things that your opponent won't expect because 'cause they're not part of your standard line that will, you know, get around their defenses against your most predictable options.
Right.
Um and that's like so your task is basically adjust to what you see them doing because your baseline is really, really scary.
Yeah.
Like if they need to play against your level 1, as it were, your Yomi layer 0, and if they don't, you'll just kill them because you have the stats for it.
Right.
And if they do, then you can make little tweaks and adjustments to account for them. But you probably have enough life that you have time to do it in a single game.
And you do it when they make you,
Yeah.
not when you feel like deviating, right? Like you are doing these things because they've forced you off of Yomi Layer 1.
Yeah. Yeah, like by default, you're swinging around these big cards and you're saying, "I'm moving toward you, and then when I'm close, I'm blowing you up." And
Right.
only when they find a way to answer that question do you go, "Oh, all right, I'll find something a little bit weirder to do.
Right.
I'll you know, not do that exactly. I'll do something a little bit, I'll play grasp, I guess,
Right.
because you made me."
Variant 1.1. I'll
Right.
you he's not going to have a completely different he's never going to become a zoner, right?
No,
Uh
no.
he's never going to change his game plan that much.
Yeah. You're never gonna say, "Yes, slide hit is my win con." It's not a thing.
Right.
Don't
Yeah.
no. You're never gonna say I'm a range 5 or greater character. You
Right.
you can play a little at range 4 because you have huge, right? That's an example of the variation where you go, well, they're not letting me get to range 1. They're really, really sticking to here. I guess I'll play some range 2 to 4 normals because I have a range 2 grasp and a range 4 sweep, and like
And
we'll
those are
do that
good.
for yeah, we'll do that for a turn or 2 before
Right.
we get back online.
Right.
Um,
See if it shakes them out of their play pattern so that I can run the one that I would prefer to run.
right,
Right.
right. And then resume your regular rhythm
Yep.
of take a step, look big, be big,
Be big.
hit big.
Right.
Yep.
Sounds good. All right, D. As far as I'm concerned, I've got everything. I now know everything there is to know about Potemkin. I will now proceed to sweep a tournament with him.
Yeah,
Uh,
seems
un-
correct.
unless there's anything else. This has been, as always, wonderful.
I I can't think of anything else. If y'all have if anyone watching or listening to this has not heard Potemkin's theme songs, please listen to them.
Oh
Not just
yeah,
not just the Strive one, but the older ones. The music of
yeah.
Guilty Gear is real good.
They're all
Um,
excellent. Yeah. Please do listen to Burly Heart. Listen to Armorclad of Faith.
yes, yes, please do. That's what you should be hearing when you're playing his boosts. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think,
it's
and
only correct.
I think that works for the sense of power that they give you.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I
D,
think I'm good.
thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time and your expertise as always.
I will tolerate talking about one of my favorite characters at great length.
All right.
Um,
Really, really, I've done you the favor by asking you to be on the
In
lesson.
fact in fact, yes. Thanks for letting me talk about Potemkin. I love it.
No, of
Oh
course.
gosh. Had a
No,
great time.
it was awesome. And audience, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and your attention. I will see you all for the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.